Today we're on the Sabre 45, hole number 49. We're going to do a basic engine walkthrough. Fuel system. Fuel system starts with the fuel tanks, which are behind these two walls here on each side of the boat. This is the starboard tank, but what we're going to describe will be a mirror image on the port side. So on the top of each tank is a fuel emergency shutoff valve, and there's a hole right up here in the back that you can just reach into and shut the valve off.
All right.
So here's a view of the top of the tank, and this valve right here to your right is the starboard engine emergency shutoff valve. This pickup tube here to your left is for the diesel furnace, and the valve for that is in the middle of the engine room here. I'll show you that next. Here is the valve and the filter for the diesel furnace, and just pull this yellow handle out. That'll shut the valve off. And there's the filter, and this is the fuel pump for the diesel furnace. So here we are on the port side of the boat, and like I say, it's a mirror image of the starboard side. So to access the fuel emergency shutoff valve is behind this hatch, and they're both labeled. We're on the port side here because the generator fuel supply is also through this hatch on the port side. So from there, the fuel goes to these two filters. This filter is the port engine, and this filter is the generator. So this port engine filter has a see-through bowl at the bottom, and that's so you can identify if there's any water in the fuel. So if you see anything out of the ordinary, you'll either see clear water, or you might see something milky, or you might see black debris, which would be growth. You can drain that with this plug here. And you'll need to hold the larger plug, you need to hold still with a large wrench and remove the smaller plug. This larger plug holds the whole assembly together, so that needs to not move, just the small inner plug. And you can pull the plug out and drain the water out until you see diesel coming out, and then put the plug back in. It's also good on these filters to check the level of the fuel inside the filter. Raycor says it only needs to be above the inlet and the outlet, which are here. So somewhere above. I do like to keep as little air in here as possible, and you would need to have separate fuel in a container that you could pour into the top of the filter. There's a T-nut on the top here. The whole top comes off, and you can pour fuel in. I would recommend doing this with the fuel valve shut off. The filter's pretty high, and it's not likely to become overcome with fuel in the tank, but still it's good practice to shut the valve off. This filter here is very similar. This is a drain plug. This plug here is for a water and fuel probe, which is not equipped on this boat. So this would be the plug you're taking off. Again, you're going to hold this whole bottom unit still while you take this plug off. This entire cap is threaded on and capturing the filter. Pull this off, drain the fluid. The top of this fuel filter has a priming plug, so you don't need to pull the top of it off to get fuel back inside it. You just unthread this pump handle, and I'm going to pull it up here, and you can see the shaft. That's the pump handle. Of course, it's not going to work very well because it's full of fuel for me, but if you need to purge the air out of it, you can just pump this until it gets stiff and then thread it back in, and that'll fill this with fuel. It will likely push the air through to the engine, but that's fine. The engine can pass air through it without damaging the engine at all. So from the port engine fuel filter, the fuel line goes to the port engine. Okay, so I'm here next to the starboard engine, and the reason I'm here is it's just easier to show you. These again are mirror images of each other. So from the starboard fuel filter, Raycor filter, it goes to the on engine filter, which is here. That's the next stop. So A couple things to know about this filter is there is a water in fuel sensor built into this filter, and that'll tell you if there's any water in the fuel. And the nice thing about this sensor is it's very sensitive, so a very small amount of water will set the alarm off, and that's long before you're going to have any water ingested by the engine. So if your water and fuel alarm goes off, you need to get the water out of the bottom of this fuel filter. The alarm will be up at the main display. So to get the water out, you need to unplug the sensor, which is here. And this plug, you just push this wire in right here and pull it out. And now, in the back here, you may not be able to see it, is a small drain hole built into this big threaded knob here. And all you need to do is loosen this. You don't need to take this knob all the way out. Just loosen it a turn or two, and fuel will drain out of the little bleed hole in the bottom. You capture it in a paper cup. When you're done, you just tighten it back up, snap the wires back on, and then to get air out of this filter, again, the motor can pass air. So if it's a small amount of air, you could try starting the motor a couple times. It may pass right through. If it's a large amount of air and you won't be able to get this motor started, then you can purge the air out of it through these two pieces here. This is a bleed screw. Pull the plastic cover off, loosen that about a half a turn, and this is the pump. And so you can just pump it by hand until you see solid diesel coming out, streaming out of this bleed screw. And when you do that, you can tighten that back up, put this cap back on, and there may be a small amount of air in there, but again, a couple of attempts at starting the motor will push that air right through, and then once you get to solid fuel, the motor will start. The return line back to the tank from the engine is right here. And this has no valves on it, and it goes straight to the tank and pumps fuel back into the tank that the engine's not using. So the next thing you want to check on the engine is the coolant level, and that is checked underneath this yellow cap right here. And you can see inside there's a bar running across right here. And on that bar, it has a low spot in the middle and a high spot on either side. And the coolant level should be between those two levels. The cooling system for this engine starts here at the pod. This is the raw water inlet to go to the heat exchanger to cool the engine. It has a shut-off valve here on it, so you can shut it off in an emergency if you have a hose leak or something. So from that valve, the raw water travels up this tube to the C strainer. The C strainer is mounted on the engine. So to clean out the basket of the C strainer is very simple on this boat. You do not need to shut off the valve. You can leave it open. This is above the water line. So you just undo the latch on this band here. And this is the cap for the C strainer. It has an O-ring here. And this is the basket. So you just pull the basket out and you can rinse it out, wipe it clean. And then to put it back in is a bit of a trick, but there are two locating holes here. And there's two pins coming up from the bottom that these holes need to engage. And it can be a bit of a trick. There we go. Now you can see it just dropped all the way down here. It's engaged those two pins. Check, make sure the gasket's all right. This gasket may be attached to the lid, but it may not. It may be loose. There's no glue on it. So if it's loose, you can just make sure it's right inside the groove here. And then put the cap back on, the band back on. Make sure that this V-band captures the cap and this black base here. So, and you can feel it when it's just right, and that'll Okay, from the sea strainer, the raw water goes to the raw water pump, which is right here. This is an impeller style pump. That means it has a rubber impeller behind this plate. If the boat runs dry for any length of time, it may overheat and damage the blades of this impeller. So if you're not pumping water, you can look behind this plate to check the condition of the impeller. From there, it goes into the engine and engine heat exchanger and cools the engine coolant. And then it is injected into the exhaust stream at the back of the engine, and then from there it goes out the bottom of the pot. Okay, there's two ways to check the oil on this engine. One is at the display, which we'll show you later, but you can also check it physically here with the dipstick. This dipstick has a clip to keep it clipped in place. So you just need to pop it out of its clip and then pull it out, wipe it clean, and you can see the hash marks there showing you the level. So you wipe it clean, push it back in, pull it out again, and check the level. You always want to pull it out and wipe it clean first, because it's hard to know if inadvertently some oil has creeped up the dipstick. Okay, to check the oil and transmission oil levels on the engine, you can also check it through the display. So you start by pressing Home, Info. Down here is Vessel Info, and then Oil Level. And that's going to show you engine oil level and transmission. To start the engines, you're going to go first to the circuit breaker panel here. We want to have our electronics turned on, bridge supply, wipers, and nav lights. And then you'll turn on the engine battery solenoids. So turn both of those on. And then we'll head up here to the helm. And the ignition buttons are at the top here. Start with the port. Port ignition on, starboard ignition on, port start, starboard start. Turning the ignitions on wakes up the displays. The joystick has a few options here. It has a docking mode, so you can press that, and that's joystick docking. This is DPS, so this will anchor the boat in one specific spot using the engines. This button is joystick steering, so you can drive the boat with joystick steering. And this is high mode, so when you're docking, if it's very windy, you can hit high mode, and that gives you more power as you use the joystick. Okay, now that we've been in docking mode and we've pulled away from the dock with the joystick, you don't need to touch anything here on the joystick. You just put the boat into gear, and it'll automatically take it out of joystick driving and put it in wheel drive. Okay, when you start the engines on this boat at the main helm, it automatically switches to that station. So you have control only at the helm station. You don't have any control here. So to take control at the joystick back here, you need to press this first button here. It says off, and then you'll see it says on. And what that's done is it's taken command to this station only. You won't be able to control the boat from the helm now, only this spot. You'll see docking's automatically lit up, and that's because the only thing the station does is docking. So we can dock the boat here. Now, to take station back at the helm, so this helm is completely dark here, so we call it taking station. So you want to take this station, press the button, and now total control of the vessel is from here, and you no longer can operate anything in the back there. If you push this button twice, I pushed it once to turn it green, and now it's got this red lock. That means you cannot take station in the back. It's locked out. And the same is true back there. If you push the button twice, it'll lock out this station. So to unlock it, just press it again. I hope you enjoyed our Sabre 45, the basic engine walkthrough.